"You're worthless, get off this base, now!" The captain barked at the female soldiers standing at attention, treating her like a low-ranking grunt mistakenly assigned to this elite SEAL unit. She didn't argue, she simply bent to pick up the rucksack that had just been hurled to the ground. But as the zipper popped open, a SEAL colonel's insignia fell out, spun once across the concrete, and came to rest under everyone's horrified gaze. Only then did they realize the woman they'd mocked wasn't a rookie at all, but a covert superior sent by the Pentagon to inspect the team's discipline. She clenched the insignia in her hand and looked up, and from that moment, the man who had slapped her knew he had just destroyed his own future. Raven Ward stood there on the sun-baked parade ground of the Coronado base, the salt air thick with the smell of the ocean and the faint tang of gun oil. Her uniform was faded, the name tape long since ripped off the fabric, worn thin at the elbows and knees, from years of real use, not parade ground polish. She was 31, tall with dark hair pulled back in a tight knot that showed the clean lines of her face, no makeup, no jewelry, nothing to draw the eye except the steady way she held herself. The men of Bravo 12 circled her like wolves who'd scented easy prey. Captain Rylan Cross, 35, broad-shouldered and loud, the kind of guy who wore his authority like cologne you could smell across the room, stepped forward first. Cross didn't just stand, he moved with the aggressive territorial grace of a predator who enjoyed making others shrink. He strode in a wide arc, deliberately closing the distance until the shadows of his bulk fell across Raven. He paused not directly in front of her, but slightly to the side, forcing her to subtly crane her neck to maintain eye contact. A cheap trick of body language he used to establish immediate unspoken dominance. His hand, thick and scarred, went to the radio clipped to his shoulder, not to use it, but merely to draw her focus to the tools of his command. His breath, a stale mix of coffee and chew tobacco, wafted over her, a calculated intrusion into her personal space, designed to trigger a flinch, a break in posture, any sign of discomfort that he could capitalize on. But Raven Ward remained perfectly still, her spine a rod of unbreakable composure. Her eyes, the color of wet slate, held steady, not tracking his movements, but fixed immutably on a point just above his right shoulder, stripping his movement of all meaning and power. This silence, this absolute refusal to acknowledge his performance, seemed to irritate him more than any verbal rebuttal could have, turning his practiced intimidating advance into a frustrated static pose. The only movement was the subtle tremor in his own hand, betraying the raw annoyance under the veneer of his supposed calm. He looked her up and down, lips curling in a sneer that said he'd already decided everything about her. "Wrong building, sweetheart," Cross said, voice dripping with fake pity. "The daycare's 2 blocks east." A couple of the younger guys snickered, shifting their weight rifles slung loose. Dax Hunter, 29, the team's self-appointed comedian, with a jawline sharp enough to cut glass and an ego to match, leaned against a Humvee and added, "Yeah, and bring your pom-poms. We're fresh out of cheerleaders." The team's collective behavior was a masterclass in calculated exclusion, each man contributing a small, sharp shard of contempt, designed to wound or force a reaction. As Raven began to adjust the collar of her worn uniform, a minor necessary gesture, Dax, without breaking his relaxed posture against the Humvee, flicked a half-eaten protein bar wrapper straight at her chest. It wasn't a hard throw, just a casual dismissive piece of trash tossed at someone deemed beneath the effort of genuine engagement. The wrapper fluttered, hitting the faded fabric with a soft, audible thwack, then spiraled gently to the ground. This wasn't bullying. It was worse, it was treating her like an object in the environment, a spot on the concrete that could be used as a target for refuse. Raven's eyes did not follow the wrapper's descent. Her posture did not shift. She simply continued the small, precise adjustment of her collar, her fingers moving with the kind of economical purpose that spoke of years spent eliminating wasted motion. The entire team watched, waiting for the expected explosion of indignation, but her steady focus transformed the aggressive act into a non-event, leaving Dax with a sudden ugly feeling of having overplayed a hand that wasn't even worth dealing. The laughter spread low and mean, the kind that builds when a group decides someone doesn't belong. Nobody offered a hand. Nobody asked her name. They just stared, waiting for her to shrink. Raven didn't. She met Cross's eyes for a beat, then looked past him to the warehouse door. "Warehouse needs inventory," she said, voice flat. No plea in it. Cross barked a laugh and jerked his thumb toward the sagging metal building. Get to it, rookie. And don't touch anything that isn't a mop. She walked, boots steady on the gravel. As Raven started her walk toward the metal warehouse, her focus unwavering Cade Mercer. The lieutenant position closest to the rear of the formation allowed his gaze to drop slightly, while the others, cross loudest among them, continued to issue low dismissive comments aimed at her retreating back. Cade performed a small, almost imperceptible task. He shifted his boot, crushing a tiny dried-out twig beneath the heel. This action was entirely unnecessary, and yet intensely deliberate, a silent grounding moment he needed to steady the tremors of his own complicity. He knew with a certainty that was twisting his gut into a knot of cold wire that the inventory order was a smokescreen. The crates inside the warehouse were not standard supply. They contained the sealed encrypted operational contingency plans for the next 3 major Pacific exercises. Sensitive information that only a commanding officer with specific high-level clearance would ever be tasked to verify, let alone count. His silence, the terrible weight of his obedience to the order to conceal her identity, felt like a betrayal of the mission itself, and the crushed twig was the only physical release he allowed for the internal pressure that was building brick by slow brick around his throat. The men watched her go, already dismissing her, already planning the next joke. Inside the warehouse, the air was cooler, thick with dust and the smell of old canvas. She set the rucksack down, rolled her shoulders once, and started counting crates. Inside the vast echoing shell of the warehouse, Raven didn't just count crates. She conducted a quiet, comprehensive survey of the facility's structural vulnerabilities and operational readiness. Her counting was a rhythmic cover for a more intense observation. She was cataloging the precise placement of every security camera, noting the faint, irregular flicker in the distant corner, where the infrared system was likely malfunctioning, and tracking the worn path in the concrete floor that indicated the fastest, least observed route to the high-value weapons cage. Her fingers running along the rough stenciled labels of the boxes registered not just the number, but the exact composition of the glue used on the packaging tape, a tiny detail suggesting a specific procurement chain. She located 2 separate poorly maintained fire exits, and without moving her head, gauged the precise angle of a ventilation shaft that was just large enough for a slim person to slip through. This was not the work of a rookie grunt. This was the methodical, almost clinical reconnaissance of someone who wasn't preparing for inventory, but for a hostile immediate insertion, analyzing the structure as both a potential fortress and a potential trap. Every label, every serial number. She didn't rush. She didn't look back. Later that afternoon, the team gathered on the obstacle course, the sun beating down like it had a personal grudge. Cross stood at the start line, stopwatch in hand, barking out the challenge. Wall swim range, 800 meters in the bay, then sniper qual at 200. Fail, and you're gone. He looked right at Raven when he said it. She was last in line, no harness, no fins, just the boots she'd worn all day. Dax elbowed the guy next to him. Bet she drowns before the first buoy. The whistle blew. Men surged forward, all muscle and noise. Raven started slow pace, even like she was out for a jog. She hit the wall clean hands, finding purchase where others slipped. Up and over. Into the water. Stroke steady, no splash. The team's approach to the 800-meter swim was powered by aggression and desperation, resulting in wide, choppy splashes that wasted energy and announced their positions like cannon fire. Raven, emerging from the cold, turbulent waters of the bay, demonstrated an antithesis of their violent exertion. Instead of scrambling, her movement from water to land was a single fluid extension. She didn't use her hands to pull herself out. The kinetic energy from her final efficient kick carried her torso smoothly over the low seawall, and her feet found purchase on the concrete without a single wasted movement of her arms. The men, winded and shivering, were left struggling to shed the excess water weight that clung to their sodden fatigues and gear. Raven, however, had chosen clothing and gear that shed moisture instantly. She wrung a small, precise quantity of water from the tight knot of her hair, not to dry it, but to ensure water wouldn't sting her eyes on the range, a minuscule predictive action that spoke volumes of her pre-planning. She carried no unnecessary mass, no wasted breath, no visible sign of the effort expended, making the exhausted gasps and cursing of the men, dragging themselves onto the range, look like the clumsy theater of amateurs. The team was already panting when she surfaced on the far side, By the time the others dragged themselves onto the range, soaked and cursing, Raven was toweling off, breathing easy. She took the rifle handed to her standard M4, no bells, and dropped to prone. 3 shots, 3 hits, center mass. When the rangemaster, an old Navy chief petty officer, whose face was usually as immovable as granite, called out the triple score, his hand, which held the clipboard, gave a single involuntary jerk, scattering a few loose rubber bands onto the dirt. The call of center mass confirmed 3 for 3 total elapsed time, 5 seconds hung in the heavy afternoon air, silencing the immediate hostile murmuring of the team. Cross didn't shout or argue at first. He went utterly still, his muscular neck tightening until the veins stood out like cords. He took the stopwatch from his wrist, and instead of resetting it or putting it away, he flung it straight down into the dirt at his feet. The cheap plastic housing shattered with a pathetic hollow crack. An act of violent, impotent rage directed entirely at the clock, the undeniable arbiter of time and performance that had just invalidated his entire worldview about the woman standing calmly before him. The captain didn't pick up the broken timepiece. He simply ground his heel into the fragments, turning the plastic and metal into a fine, meaningless powder. A clear, silent instruction to his team that the measurement of performance in this instance was officially irrelevant. The rangemaster called the scores, voice cracking a little. Cross's face went red under his tan. Luck, he spat. 1 good day doesn't make a seal. Raven just handed the rifle back barrel down and walked to the shade. Dax muttered something about beginner's luck and affirmative action, but his voice didn't carry like it usually did. A couple guys exchanged looks. Something wasn't adding up. Cross, fueled by the immediate bitter need to reassert his authority and wash the taste of defeat from his mouth, spun on the rest of Bravo 12. He didn't speak of Raven's performance. He spoke of theirs. With a voice that stripped the air of its warmth, he announced an immediate, unscheduled, forced march. Gear up. Full pack. Perimeter check. 3 miles double time, and don't stop until I say so. That goes for all of you. Your collective failure to meet a basic range standard is unacceptable, and you will pay for it as a team. This was a common disciplinary tactic, a punitive measure designed to make the men resent the cause of their extra pain. Every man instinctively understood the order was a transparent, cowardly proxy. Punishment. Cross couldn't touch Raven's score, so he punished the others for being worse than her, effectively framing her success as the root of their misery. As the men began to silently strap on their heavy packs, their eyes shot back to Raven in the shade. She didn't meet their gaze, didn't offer sympathy, and didn't leave. She merely leaned against the warm, dusty wall, a silent, unmoving audience to the punishment her competence had provoked, allowing the resentment and the subtle seed of doubt to take root. That evening in the team room, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Cross paced, boots thudding. Raven stood at parade rest near the back, still in the same uniform, still silent. Cross spun on her. You think you're hot shit after one lucky run? His voice rose, spit flying. This is my team. My rules. He stepped in, close finger jabbing her chest. Then his hand cracked across her face, open palm, loud as a gunshot. The sound of Cross's open hand striking Raven's cheek was a dense concussive clap that momentarily eclipsed the buzzing fluorescent lights. It wasn't the sound of an accidental brush. It was the sound of a captain making a deliberate final decision to physically dominate, to break the unyielding silence of the woman who threatened his control. The impact snapped Raven's head sharply to the side, and the sudden stinging red mark bloomed instantly high on her cheekbone. She didn't stumble, didn't raise a hand to the pain, nor did she make a sound. Instead, she performed an action that was utterly disarming. She slowly, methodically rotated her head back to center, then used the tip of her tongue to press against the inside of her mouth, feeling for the telltale slickness of blood. Finding none, she swallowed one slowly and focused her gaze not on Cross's triumphant heaving chest, but on his left boot, noting the loose shoelace flapping near the heel. This immediate, almost surgical check for injury, followed by the observation of a completely irrelevant minor tactical detail. The loose lace served as a calculated non-verbal declaration. The physical act had failed to register on her scale of priorities, transforming the assault into a mere administrative error on Cross's part. The room went dead. Dax's phone was already up, recording grin wide. Viral gold, he said. Cross grabbed her rucksack and flung it. It hit the floor zipper, bursting. Gear scattered. And there it was, the Silver Eagle, the Trident, the name C-O-O-R Ward. The room froze. Cross's hand was still raised, knuckles white. Dax's phone dipped. Someone whispered, "Holy shit." In the oppressive silence that followed the sight of the Colonel's Silver Eagle, the atmosphere in the team room fractured violently into distinct nonverbal camps. Cross remained a statue of paralyzed shock, mouth agape, his adrenaline-fueled rage abruptly replaced by a paralyzing leaden fear. Dax, seeing the potential virality of his video dissolve into career-ending evidence, began to back away, a desperate animalistic shuffle that scraped his boots loudly against the linoleum. But Cade Mercer's reaction was the most telling. He took 3 deliberate steps toward the center of the room, positioned himself between the Colonel and the now terrified captain, and then, without making eye contact with anyone, he began to methodically pick up the scattered contents of Raven's rucksack. He collected the gear with a soldier's precision, a specialized GPS unit, a folded satellite map, a heavy encrypted communications hardline, placing each item back into the bag. This wasn't an act of service. It was a desperate public gesture of loyalty and knowledge, a silent, unmistakable signal to the rest of Bravo. 12 that the game was over, and the woman standing before them was not just an inspector, but a figure of power he had known and respected long before this disastrous charade began. Raven bent slow, picked up the insignia. She turned it over in her fingers, once then pinned it to her collar. The crisp, metallic click of the Colonel's insignia, settling onto the stiff collar fabric, was the loudest sound in the room. An audible snap that marked the irreversible shift from covert theater to overt, undeniable command. With the Eagle and Trident now formally in place, Raven's entire physical presence seemed to inflate, not through movement, but through the sudden, absolute weight of her rank. The slumped, tired shoulders of the rookie were instantly gone, replaced by a posture that projected both immense gravity and lethal efficiency. She didn't need to shout. The simple act of looking at Cross delivered a silent, perfectly calibrated blow. Her gaze was not angry, not triumphant, but purely diagnostic, the kind of cold assessing look a surgeon gives to a piece of cancerous tissue. This look stripped Cross of his uniform, his title, and his history, leaving him exposed as a petulant, undisciplined boy, caught in an act of petty violence. The transformation was so profound that several junior members of the team instinctively straightened their own uniforms, clearing their throats as if the very air around Colonel Ward now demanded a higher standard of military bearing. "Continue," she said, voice calm as the bay at dawn. The show was just getting good. Cross opened his mouth, closed it, his face drained of color. Cade Mercer, the Lieutenant 32, lean and quiet. The only one who'd known her from before, looked at the floor. He'd been ordered to keep quiet. Now the secret was out, and the weight of it settled over the room like smoke. Cross recovered first, or tried to. He called an emergency huddle in the corner, voices low urgent. "Delete the video. Say it was a training exercise. She's nobody." Dax nodded too fast, thumbs flying over his phone. But the damage was done. Whispers spread through the base faster than heat lightning. By morning, the video was gone from Dax's phone, but screenshots live forever. Someone had already sent it up the chain. Raven spent the night in the warehouse inventory, finished reports typed on a battered laptop. She didn't sleep much. She didn't need to. The fragile temporary authority of Captain Cross, though formally still intact, until the SEC-DEF order was processed, became immediately toxic, breeding a desperate, vengeful action overnight. When Raven emerged at dawn, her face pale in the artificial light of the armory, she found the bolt carrier group of her old M40 rifle. The weapon she would use on the range had been carefully, maliciously stripped and scattered across the floor of the secured room, the tiny critical pins and springs hidden in the dust and oil. This was not a simple act of vandalism. It was a clear message that someone, likely Dax at Cross's frantic direction, had been willing to compromise mission readiness for a point of personal spite. The act was a low, petty challenge to her technical skill. Raven surveyed the mess, the dozens of small, vital components scattered like iron filings, without any visible spike in her heart rate. She reached into a small pouch on her belt, pulled out a magnetized screwdriver, and began the intricate, precise process of reassembly. She worked for 20 minutes, ignoring the faint shadow of Cross watching from the doorway. her movements smooth and unhurried, demonstrating a depth of mechanical knowledge that went far beyond mere familiarity, ensuring that when she stepped onto the range, the rifle would fire flawlessly, a silent, unforgiving answer to the sabotage. Next day, the team assembled for live fire. Cross was all bluster voice louder to cover the shake in it. Standard qual, 200 meters. Let's see if the princess can repeat her trick. The wind off the ocean whipped the flag's gusts, pushing 30 knots. Targets danced. One by one, the men fired. Misses piled up. Curses. Cross's shots went wide. His jaw clenched so tight it looked painful. Raven waited her turn. When the range went hot, she lifted a different rifle, an old M40 Woodstock scarred from real wars. She didn't sight long. One breath, one squeeze. The bullet flew 2,000 meters, punched through 3 moving plates in a row. The triple kill was more than just 3 hits. It was a devastating technical display that defied the 30-knot crosswind. The first shot fired from the old M40 punched clean through the center plate at 2,000 meters, and the men nodded, difficult but achievable. But the second shot, fired less than a heartbeat later, was aimed at the opposite edge of the target, and instead of simply hitting it, deliberately fractured the thin steel of the plate's mounting hinge, causing the entire target to swing violently on its axis, transforming a static target into a wildly unpredictable pendulum. The third shot, fired mid-swing, was a breathtaking act of ballistic computation. Raven didn't aim at the target itself, but at a specific point on the ground, 15 feet behind it, allowing the Earth's hard surface to deflect the bullet upward and into the final plate's center mass, just as the pendulum completed its apex swing. This technique, a high-risk, high-reward ricochet that required perfect wind and density calculation, was a signature move known only to the top, deep-cover snipers of the program, a move that only confirmed Cade's revelation, and provided irrefutable evidence that her prior service record was not just elite, but legendary. The Rangemaster's voice cracked over the speaker. Confirmed. Triple kill. Silence. Then Cade stepped forward, voice low. She was top sniper Bravo 01. Before your time, sir. Cross spun, face purple. Shut up, Mercer. But the damage spread. Men looked at Raven differently now. Not with respect, yet just calculation. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just reloaded slow and deliberate and walked off the line. That afternoon, Cross tried to bench her. Suspended pending review, he snapped. Dax leaned in, voice oily. Who'd you sleep with to make Colonel, huh? Daddy's friends at the Pentagon. A couple guys laughed, but it was nervous now. Raven looked at Dax for a long second. Jealousy doesn't suit you, Sergeant. Then she walked away. Cross screamed after her. Nobody takes orders from you. He even tried to have the MPs detain her. They showed up, looked at her collar, and left. By evening, the base was buzzing. Raven stood in the center of the parade ground, tablet in hand. The team was forced into formation. Cross still barking orders, nobody followed anymore. She tapped the screen. A voice, calm, mechanical, read aloud. By order of SecDef, Colonel Raven Ward is hereby appointed temporary commanding officer, SEAL Team Bravo 12, effective immediately, all prior authority suspended. The CCTV feed rolled on the big screen behind her, Cross's slap clear as day. MPs moved in, cuffs ready. Cross lunged, screaming about conspiracies, but they took him down smooth. Dax dropped to his knees, babbling apologies. Raven didn't look at him. Cross got loud one last time as they dragged him away. They'll never respect you. You're alone, always will be. His voice echoed off the buildings. Raven watched the MPs load him into the van. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The team stood in ragged lines, eyes down. Then Cade stepped forward, unclipped his own trident, and laid it at her feet. One by one, the others followed. Not forced, not fake, real. Lead us, ma'am, Cade said. The wind caught the flag overhead, snapping sharp. The sight of the dozens of brass tridents, the symbol of SEAL qualification, resting in a shimmering quiet pile at Raven's feet, was the silent ultimate victory. She moved through the pile, her fingers brushing the cold metal, a tactile confirmation of the team's surrender and renewed loyalty. When she came to the trident that belonged to Dax Hunter, she hesitated. Instead of pinning it back, she lifted it between her thumb and forefinger, holding the symbol up to catch the weak light, turning it over to show the dirt and scuff marks that covered the small engraved anchor. She made no comment, offered no glare, but simply placed the symbol not back on his chest, but on the ground beside his feet, a clear, devastating visual metaphor for the rank and respect he had just permanently forfeited. She then moved to the last trident, the one belonging to Cross, and did the same, leaving both men, one sobbing apologies and the other screaming obscenities from the confines of the van, physically and symbolically stripped of the only identity that mattered to them. The final sight was Raven turning away from the two symbols lying in the dust, her attention now solely on the men who were still standing, the new reformed Bravo 12, ready to receive their new commanding officer's first order. Raven picked up each trident, pinned it back on every chest except two. Cross and Dax watched from the van, faces pressed to the window, futures gone. The base settled into a new rhythm after that. Raven ran the team hard dawn PT night shoots, missions planned down to the second. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Men who'd mocked her now, asked questions, took notes, pushed themselves harder than Cross ever had. Cade became her shadow, making up for the silence he'd kept. The video never surfaced publicly. Pentagon buried it, but the story spread in whispers. Sponsors dropped Dax's side hustle. Cross-faced court-martials stripped of rank benefits gone. Nobody cheered, nobody needed to. Justice wasn't loud, it just was. Weeks later, Raven stood on the same parade ground at sunset, the team in perfect formation. She walked the line, adjusting a stance here, a grip there. Her uniform was still plain, but now it carried weight. The men stood taller. The flag snapped overhead. She stopped at the end, turned to face them. "Dismissed," she said. They snapped salutes crisp enough to cut glass. As they filed out, Cade lingered. "You okay, Colonel?" She nodded once. Better than okay. He smiled small and jogged to catch up with the others.